I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. My name is Emily Johnson, and at 62 years old, I never imagined I would uncover the most heartless plan devised by my own flesh and blood. It all began on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I had spent the morning baking my son Michael's favorite chocolate cake, the same recipe I'd used since he was a little boy with chocolate smears on his cheeks. I wanted to surprise him at his law office downtown. My hands felt the familiar satisfaction of creating something with love, even as the arthritis made my fingers ache. As I pulled into the parking lot of the glass-fronted building where Michael worked, I spotted his silver BMW in the corner. A mischievous idea came to me. I would hide in his back seat and surprise him when he returned to his car. I hadn't done something playful like this in years. I glanced around to make sure no one was watching, then slipped into his unlocked car. I crouched behind his front seats, my heart fluttering with childish excitement, the chocolate cake box balanced carefully on my lap. I imagined the smile that would spread across his face, the same smile I'd treasured since he was 8 years old, when his father Thomas died in that terrible construction accident. Minutes passed that felt like hours. Finally, I heard footsteps approaching and held my breath. The driver's door opened, and Michael slid in. But before I could spring my surprise, the passenger door opened too. A woman's perfume, expensive and overpowering, filled the car. Olivia, Michael's wife of 5 years. "Did you talk to Dr. Thompson about the medication?" Olivia asked, her voice hushed but clear in the quiet car. My smile faded. What medication? I hadn't been told about any health concerns. "He said it would be undetectable in the autopsy," Michael replied in a tone I'd never heard from him before. Cold. Calculated. "The dosage has to be perfect, though. Too little and it won't work. Too much and they might detect it." My blood ran cold. "Autopsy dosage," I froze, barely breathing. "Are you absolutely sure no one will suspect anything when it happens?" Olivia asked, her manicured nails tapping nervously on her designer purse, a purse I knew cost more than my monthly pension. "We've talked about this 1,000 times, Michael sighed with impatience. "The plan is perfect. Mom will have a very natural, very believable heart attack. No one questions when a woman her age with high blood pressure suddenly dies." The air seemed to escape from my lungs. I couldn't be hearing correctly. My son, my only child for whom I had sacrificed everything, was planning to kill me. "And after the funeral, when everything settles down, we can sell that old house and finally move into Lakeside Estates," Olivia continued with unmistakable excitement. "With the $200,000 the property is worth, plus her $50,000 are in savings and the $100,000 are life insurance, we'll have enough for the down payment and to clear our credit card debt." My mind went numb. That old house was where I had raised Michael alone, working 2, sometimes 3 cleaning jobs to keep a roof over our heads. Every corner held memories: Michael's height marks on the kitchen door frame, the dent in the living room wall from when he got his first baseball, the garden where we planted tomatoes every spring. "James and Catherine are on board, right?" Michael asked. Hearing my brother's name shattered what little composure I had left. My older brother James was involved in this nightmare too. "Of course they are," Olivia scoffed. "Your uncle is desperate since he lost his position at the insurance company, and Catherine won't stop reminding me how your mother has always been stingy with them." Stingy. The word pierced my heart. I had helped James with money countless times over the years: $5,000 when they needed a new roof, $3,000 when Catherine needed dental work. I'd given until it hurt, even when it meant I had to cut back on my own medications. "James will get 25% as agreed," Michael stated flatly. "Enough to pay off their second mortgage and keep Catherine quiet. The timing has to be perfect," Olivia said. "Next Sunday when we have her over for dinner, you'll put the medication in her tea. She always has tea after dinner. Then we drive her home. And by morning, she'll be gone," Michael finished. "I've already talked to Martin at the funeral home. Simple cremation, no viewing, minimal expense." My tears fell silently as I remained hidden, praying they wouldn't discover me. My body trembled with a mixture of fear and heartbreak so profound I thought I might physically break in two. They continued discussing the details for several more minutes, how Michael would find me the next morning after getting worried when I didn't answer my phone, how Olivia would play the grieving daughter-in-law, how they'd wait exactly 1 month before putting the house on the market, out of respect, when they finally exited the car to return to work. I waited another 10 minutes before I dared to move. I emerged from that back seat a completely different woman from the one who had entered with a chocolate cake and a mother's love. That woman was gone now, replaced by someone fighting for her life. I drove home in a state of shock, tears blurring my vision, the untouched cake still in its box on the passenger seat. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, trying to ground myself in anything real. To understand the magnitude of this betrayal, you need to know how we got here. My story with Michael began 35 years ago when he was born into modest circumstances. Thomas and I had been high school sweethearts, married young, and struggled to make ends meet. Thomas worked construction while I stayed home with our baby boy. When Michael was 8, Thomas fell from scaffolding at a job site. He died instantly, leaving us with nothing but a small, nearly paid-off house we'd bought with years of saving. Overnight, I became a single mother with a grieving child and no formal education beyond high school. I started cleaning houses the very next week. I would wake at 5 a.m., make Michael's breakfast and lunch, take him to school, and then clean 3, sometimes 4 houses a day. My back ached constantly from scrubbing floors. My hands cracked and bled from harsh chemicals, but I never complained. Every night, no matter how exhausted I was, I sat with Michael at the kitchen table, helping with homework, making sure he had everything he needed. Michael was brilliant, top of his class in everything. His teachers constantly told me he could be anything he wanted with that mind of his. When he was 15, he needed a computer for school projects. All the other kids had them, but 800 might as well have been 8 million to me then. I sold my wedding ring, the only valuable thing Thomas had ever given me, to buy that computer. Michael never knew. I told him I'd saved up for it. I didn't want him to feel the weight of my sacrifice or to feel different from the other kids. During his senior year, Michael decided he wanted to be a lawyer. The college applications started arriving, along with their terrifying tuition figures. $20,000 per year, an impossible sum for a cleaning lady. I approached James for help. He had a good job at an insurance company then, a nice house in the suburbs, a comfortable life with Catherine and their 2 children. I didn't ask for a handout, just a loan to help with the first year, which I promised to repay with interest. "Lydia, you're living in a fantasy world," he told me over coffee in his gleaming kitchen. "People like us don't become lawyers. Michael should get a practical job, maybe take some community college courses. I can't risk my family's security on your son's impossible dreams." His words hurt, but they didn't stop me. I took on a second job cleaning offices at night. I worked from 5 a.m. until about 11 p.m., 7 days a week. My body was constantly exhausted, but my determination never wavered. I also started selling homemade tamales on weekends, going door to door in neighborhoods where I cleaned, anything to generate a few extra dollars. Sometimes Michael would offer to help, to get a job himself, but I always refused. "Your job is to study, to get those A's. Leave the rest to me." I didn't want him to lose even a minute of the education that would be his ticket to a better life. By some miracle, I managed to save enough for his first year of tuition. The day I drove him to college, helping him carry his few belongings into the dormitory, was the proudest day of my life. I cried all the way home, tears of joy, of exhaustion, of hope. The college years were the hardest of my life. I worked myself to the bone to keep the tuition payments current. There were months when I couldn't afford to run the air conditioning in the Texas summer heat, when I ate nothing but rice and beans so I could send Michael money for books and decent clothes. During his junior year, Michael met Olivia Brown. She came from old money. Her father owned several car dealerships across the state, and she had never known what it meant to want for anything. The first time Michael brought her to our modest home, I saw the way her eyes darted around, taking in the worn furniture, the dated kitchen, the small rooms. She was polite but distant, calling me Mrs. Smith. Despite my insistence on Emily, after graduation, Michael got a job at a prestigious law firm. His starting salary was more than I had ever made in a year. I felt immense pride, but also relief. Finally, I could slow down a little, ease the punishing work schedule that had left me with chronic back pain and arthritic hands. He proposed to Olivia a year later. The wedding was elaborate and expensive. I wore a blue dress I'd found on sale and felt painfully out of place among Olivia's family with their jewelry and confident laughter. During the reception, I overheard one of Olivia's aunts ask, "And what does Michael's mother do?" when told I cleaned houses. She had simply raised her eyebrows and said, "How resilient of her." After the wedding, Michael's visits became increasingly rare. There was always an excuse work was busy. Olivia had social commitments. They were saving for a house. When they did visit, the conversation centered on their lives, their friends, their ambitions. Rarely did Michael ask about mine. I continued to work, though less than before. At 60, my body simply couldn't handle the physical demands it once had. I had managed to save about $50,000 over the years, money I kept for emergencies, or to help Michael if he ever needed it. My relationship with James and Catherine deteriorated after Michael became successful. James made pointed comments about how some people's children remember where they came from, while his own son and daughter rarely called. Catherine would ask probing questions about my finances, wondering aloud if I really needed to keep such a large house at my age. What hurt most was watching Michael change. The sweet, thoughtful boy who had once written me poems for Mother's Day and saved his allowance to buy me drugstore perfume was fading away. In his place was a man who seemed embarrassed by his origins, who corrected my grammar in front of his friends, who sighed with impatience when I didn't understand references to things I couldn't afford to experience. 6 months ago, Michael and Olivia started talking about buying a house in Lakeside Estates, an exclusive gated community where homes started at $500,000. When I asked how they planned to afford it, given the expensive lifestyle they already maintained, Michael had vaguely mentioned investment opportunities and changed the subject. I also noticed more frequent questions about my house, my savings, whether I had updated my will recently. I had naively interpreted this as concern for my well-being. Now, sitting at my kitchen table after hearing that horrible conversation in the car, everything clicked into place. The changes in Michael, the sudden interest in my finances, Olivia's influence, James and Catherine's involvement, it had all been part of a calculated plan brewing for months. My son, for whom I had sacrificed everything, wanted to murder me for my assets. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan, replaying every word I'd heard, the casual way they had discussed my death, as if I were an old appliance to be disposed of rather than a human being, their mother, their sister-in-law, the precise accounting of what my life was worth to them in dollars. At dawn, I rose with a strange clarity. If they wanted to play a deadly game, they would find I was not the feeble old woman they thought me to be. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I had become to them. I decided to do something I'd never done in my life, spy on my own family. Over the next few days, I observed Michael and Olivia's patterns. I parked near their upscale apartment complex, watching their comings and goings. I followed them to restaurants where they spent more on a single meal than I spent on groceries for a week. I listened carefully to every word when they called or visited, searching for clues, for confirmation of what I already knew. What I discovered was even more disturbing. Their lifestyle was completely unsustainable on Michael's income alone. Olivia didn't work, claiming she was building her personal brand as a lifestyle influencer. Though her social media accounts had few followers, they ate at expensive restaurants 4 or 5 nights a week. Olivia's closet was filled with designer clothes, and they had recently leased a second luxury car. I also discovered they had accumulated enormous debt. One evening while following them, I overheard Michael arguing on his phone in a parking lot. His voice raised enough for me to hear him pleading with someone about credit card payments and interest rates. They owed over $70,000 in credit cards and personal loans, with minimum payments that were strangling them financially. The financial pressure had clearly driven them to desperation, and I represented their ticket out my house, my modest savings, my life insurance. Together, these would give them exactly the amount they needed to pay off their debts and make a down payment on their dream home. But the most devastating discovery came when I decided to confront James directly. I needed to know how deeply my brother was involved in this nightmare. I drove to his house on a Wednesday evening, knowing Catherine would be at her book club. When he opened the door, Surprise and something like guilt flashed across his face. "Emily, what are you doing here?" He didn't invite me in immediately, which was unusual. "I need to talk to you. James, it's important." I kept my voice steady, though my heart was pounding. He reluctantly stepped aside, leading me into the living room I'd helped Catherine decorate years ago. The house looked shabbier than I remembered. Worn carpet, a water stain on the ceiling, furniture that had seen better days. "What's this about?" James asked, not offering me a seat or a drink. "I heard you lost your job," I said directly, watching his reaction carefully. His face flushed red. "How did you find out about that?" "It doesn't matter how I found out. What matters is that you're my brother, and you didn't tell me. How long have you been unemployed?" 3 months, he admitted, looking away. "The company downsized. Younger guys with computer skills got to stay. Men my age got pushed out." "Why didn't you come to me? James, I could have helped you." He laughed bitterly. "Howdy, help me how, Emily, with your cleaning lady money?" "I have savings," I said quietly. "I would have loaned you whatever you needed." Something dark passed across his face, not gratitude, but resentment. "Some savings," he scoffed. "We all know you're sitting on a small fortune while the rest of us struggle." His words confused me. "What are you talking about? I have about $50,000 saved. That's hardly a fortune. Plus a house worth $200,000 and a $100,000 life insurance policy," he added, his voice hard. My blood ran cold. He knew the exact figures, just as Michael and Olivia had. "How do you know about my life insurance policy?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. James realized his mistake too late. He backpedaled. "Michael mentioned it once. He was concerned about you living alone. Wanted to make sure you had your affairs in order." "I never told Michael the amount of my policy," I said. "I've never told anyone." James stood abruptly. "I think you should go now. Emily, Catherine will be home soon, and we have plans." As I walked to the door, I turned back to my brother, the boy who had taught me to ride a bike, who had threatened to beat up neighborhood boys who teased me, who had walked me down the aisle at my wedding when our father refused to attend. "James, if you needed money so badly, why didn't you just ask me directly?" He couldn't meet my eyes. "Would you have given me $25,000 no questions asked?" The figure confirmed everything. 25% of my total assets, exactly what Michael had mentioned in the car. "For my brother, yes, I would have," I said truthfully. "I would have given you every penny I had if you were truly in need. That's what family does." Something like shame crossed his face, but it was quickly replaced by hardened resolve. "Well, it's too late for that now, isn't it? Some of us have to make difficult choices when we're desperate." I left his house knowing my brother had sold my life for $25,000 that night as I sat alone in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I had taught Michael to make pancakes, where James and I had shared Christmas dinners, where I had counted pennies to make tuition payments. I made a decision that would change everything. I couldn't go to the police. What evidence did I have beyond a conversation I'd overheard while hiding in a car? They would think I was a paranoid old woman. Michael was a respected lawyer. Olivia came from a prominent family. Who would believe me over them? No. If I wanted justice, if I wanted to survive, I would need to be smarter than them. I would need proof. Irrefutable evidence of their plot. And I would need help. The next morning, I knocked on my neighbor Sarah Williams' door. At 70, Sarah had lived next door to me for over 20 years. A retired nurse with a sharp mind and sharper tongue. She was the closest thing I had to a true friend. When she opened the door, her smile quickly faded as she took in my appearance. I hadn't slept in days, and it showed. "Good Lord, Emily, you look like death warmed over," she said, pulling me inside. "What's happened?" Over coffee at her kitchen table, I told her everything: the conversation in the car, the confrontation with James, the pieces of the puzzle that had fallen into terrible place. Sarah listened without interrupting, her face growing grimmer with each detail. When I finished, she reached across the table and took my hands in hers. Her grip was surprisingly strong for a woman her age. "Emily Johnson, I have known you for 2 decades. I watched you work yourself to the bone for that boy. I saw you go without food to pay his college application fees, and now he wants to murder you for money." Her voice shook with rage. "Not while I'm alive and kicking. He won't." Relief washed over me at being believed. "What can I do? Sarah, I can't prove anything." Sarah's eyes narrowed with determination. "Not yet. You can't. But we're going to change that." She stood and began pacing, her nurse's mind clearly formulating a plan. "We need to gather evidence. We need to record them talking about this plan, and we need to be one step ahead at all times." "How?" I asked. "I have a friend," Sarah said, a small smile playing at her lips. "Robert Thompson. He was a pathologist at the hospital where I worked. Retired now, but still has connections. If they're planning to poison you with something undetectable, he'll know what they might use and how to test for it." My eyes widened. "Dr. Thompson, the same one Michael mentioned talking to about medication." Sarah's eyebrows shot up. "Impossible. Robert would never be involved in something like this. They must be talking about another Dr. Thompson." She paused, thinking. "Unless they're not actually consulting him, just using his name or reputation somehow." "What are you thinking, Sarah?" She sat back down, leaning forward intently. "Emily, what if we don't just gather evidence? What if we give them exactly what they want, your death, but on our terms?" I stared at her, uncomprehending. "What do you mean? What if we fake your death?" Sarah's eyes gleamed with a mixture of mischief and righteous anger. "Let them think their plan worked. Let them celebrate your demise, divide your assets, reveal their true colors, all while we record every incriminating word and action. Fake my death, is that even possible? With Robert's help, absolutely. He can create a legitimate-looking death certificate. I know enough about pharmaceuticals to safely simulate death-like symptoms if needed. And I have another friend, Elizabeth Turner. She's an investigative reporter for Channel 7. Once we have enough evidence, we take it all public. Maximum exposure." The idea was outlandish, terrifying, and yet strangely appealing. To witness firsthand how my family would react to my death, to see what they would say when they thought I could no longer hear them. "But what about the police?" I asked. "Isn't faking a death illegal?" Sarah waved her hand dismissively. "Not if there's a legitimate threat to your life. This would be self-defense." "Emily? Besides, we won't actually file the death certificate or collect insurance. We'll just let them think we did. The only crime being committed here is their conspiracy to murder you." I took a deep breath, weighing the enormity of what she was suggesting. "When would we do this?" "They mentioned next Sunday dinner, right? That's when they plan to poison you. So we beat them to it. You die on Saturday natural causes. A heart attack. No poison involved. That way, we control the narrative from the start." I thought about Michael, about the little boy who once made me Mother's Day cards with crayon hearts, who cried when his goldfish died, who hugged me fiercely the day I dropped him off at college. How had that sweet child become a man capable of matricide? "I'll do it," I said finally, my voice stronger than it had been in days. "I want them to face consequences for what they plan to do. I want them to know that I was smarter than they thought, that I wasn't just some disposable old woman they could murder for convenience." Sarah squeezed my hand. "That's my girl. Now, let's start planning. We have a death to arrange and a resurrection to choreograph." The next few days were a flurry of clandestine activity. Sarah contacted Dr. Thompson, who was horrified by my story and immediately agreed to help. He confirmed that there was no record of Michael consulting him professionally, meaning Michael had been using his name falsely or had spoken to someone else. Dr. Thompson explained how certain medications could create symptoms that mimicked death, temporarily slowed heart rate, shallow breathing, lowered body temperature. With his guidance and Sarah's nursing experience, we determined the safest way to simulate a heart attack, convincing enough to fool paramedics. "The key," Dr. Thompson explained during a secret meeting in Sarah's living room, "is to get the right EMT team, someone young, inexperienced, who won't look too closely at a seemingly straightforward case of cardiac arrest in an older woman with documented high blood pressure." Sarah had already identified our target, Tyler Collins, a newly certified EMT who worked Saturday shifts. "He's a good kid," she said. "Just a little green, and more importantly, he knows me from the hospital. He'll trust my assessment if I'm the one who finds you." Meanwhile, Elizabeth Turner was setting up hidden cameras in my house, tiny, nearly invisible devices that would capture everything after my death. She also helped me draft a detailed letter explaining everything, to be opened by the authorities only if something went wrong with our plan. "This is the most extraordinary story I've ever worked on," Elizabeth said as she tested the camera feeds. "When this is over, Emily, the whole world will know what they tried to do to you." By Friday night, everything was in place. I had coincidentally mentioned to Michael earlier in the week that I was feeling especially tired lately, setting the groundwork for a believable heart attack. I'd also made sure both Michael and James had used their keys to my house recently, ensuring their fingerprints would be fresh if investigated. That night, Sarah stayed with me. We sat on my porch swing watching the stars, both of us quiet with the weight of what was to come. "Are you scared?" Sarah asked finally. "Terrified," I admitted. "But not of dying. I'm scared of what comes after facing them, knowing for certain that they celebrated my death." Sarah nodded solemnly. "It will hurt worse than anything, but then you'll rise from those ashes stronger than you've ever been, and they'll have to live with the consequences of their actions for the rest of their lives." I thought about Michael, about James, about the family I thought I had versus the reality I'd discovered. "I keep trying to understand how it came to this," I said softly. "Where did I go wrong as a mother, as a sister?" "You didn't go wrong anywhere, Emily," Sarah said firmly. "You gave everything you had for those ungrateful people. Their choices are not your failure." As the night deepened around us, I found myself wondering what Thomas would think if he could see what had become of our son. Would he be as blindsided as I was? Or would he have seen signs I missed before we went to bed? I took one last walk through my house, touching the doorframe with Michael's height marks, straightening the family photos on the wall, running my fingers over the small dent where his first baseball had gone astray. Tomorrow, I would die in this house, and the day after, I would watch from hiding as my family revealed who they truly were. My last thought before falling into a fitful sleep was that no matter what happened next, the Emily Johnson who woke tomorrow would not be the same woman who closed her eyes tonight. Something was ending not my life, but perhaps the life I had believed in until now, and something new, something stronger and unflinching, was about to begin. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, sunlight streaming through my bedroom curtains. I stared at the ceiling, taking deep breaths to calm my racing heart. Today was the day I would die. Sarah arrived at 9 a.m. sharp, carrying a small medical bag. Her face was a mask of professional determination, but I could see the concern in her eyes. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked, setting her bag on the kitchen table. "A little," I lied. In truth, I had spent most of the night sitting in Michael's childhood bedroom, surrounded by his trophies and school photographs, trying to reconcile the sweet-faced boy in those frames with the man who had planned my murder. Sarah laid out several small bottles and a syringe. "Robert brought these over this morning. This combination will slow your heart rate and breathing dramatically, lower your blood pressure, and reduce your body temperature. To anyone without sophisticated medical equipment, you'll appear to have suffered cardiac arrest." I eyed the medications nervously. "Is it dangerous?" Sarah met my gaze directly. "I won't lie to you, Emily. There's always risk with medications like these. But Robert calculated the dosage specifically for your weight and medical history. I'll be monitoring you the entire time. And I have counteracting medications if needed." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small device. "This is a pulse oximeter. I'll have it on your finger the whole time, hidden under a blanket, even when you appear to have no pulse to standard checking methods. This will tell me your actual oxygen levels and heart rate." I nodded, swallowing hard. "How long will I be like that?" "About an hour, maybe less. Long enough for the paramedics to arrive, pronounce you deceased, and begin the paperwork. Then they'll transport you to the hospital where Robert will be waiting. He'll officially pronounce you dead and facilitate your resurrection once we're in private." The clinical way she described my impending fake death sent chills down my spine. Yet beneath my fear was a steely determination I hadn't felt in years. "And the cameras?" I asked. "Elizabeth activated them remotely this morning. They're recording everything, and will continue recording for the next 72 hours. We'll capture their reactions when they get the news. When they come to your house afterward. Everything." We spent the next few hours going over every detail of the plan one final time. I changed into a simple blue nightgown, something I would believably wear around the house on a Saturday. Sarah arranged my hair to look slightly disheveled, but not alarming. At 2:30 p.m., I sat on my living room sofa, trying to calm my nerves. In 30 minutes, I would take the medications. 15 minutes after that, Sarah would discover me unconscious and call 911. "Emily," Sarah said gently, taking my trembling hands in hers. "Are you absolutely sure you want to do this? It's not too late to back out." I thought of Michael and Olivia coldly discussing my death over tea, of James selling me out for $25,000 of being treated as nothing more than an inconvenient obstacle to my family's financial aspirations. "I'm sure," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I need to know exactly who they are when they think I can't see them anymore." At precisely 3:00 p.m., Sarah administered the cocktail of medications. The taste was bitter, making me grimace. "How long until it takes effect?" I asked, setting the empty glass on the coffee table. 15 to 20 minutes, Sarah replied, checking her watch. "You'll feel drowsy first, then your breathing will become shallow, and your pulse will decrease dramatically." She sat beside me, holding my hand and monitoring my vital signs with sharp eyes. "Remember, no matter what happens, I'm right here with you." The medications worked faster than expected. Within 10 minutes, a heavy lethargy swept over me. My limbs felt leaden, my thoughts becoming cloudy and distant. I tried to say something to Sarah, but found my voice wouldn't cooperate. "Emily, can you hear me?" Sarah's voice seemed to come from far away. Though she was right beside me, I wanted to nod, to give some sign that I was still present, but my body refused to respond. It was as if I were sinking underwater, still conscious but disconnected from physical reality. "Perfect," I heard Sarah say, her voice now merely a whisper to my fading senses. "Your vital signs are exactly where we need them to be. I'm going to arrange you on the floor now and call 911. With professional efficiency, Sarah carefully moved my unresponsive body from the sofa to the floor, positioning me in a way that suggested I had collapsed suddenly. I felt her hands arranging my limbs, placing a thin blanket over my lower half, but it was as if she were touching someone else's body. Through the strange haze that had enveloped me, I heard Sarah dial 911, her voice shifting from clinical calm to convincing panic. "Please, help my friend. I just found her unconscious in her house. I think she's had a heart attack. No, she's not breathing properly. I can barely feel a pulse. Yes, 1423 Oakwood Lane. Please hurry," while we waited for the paramedics. Sarah kept up the charade, speaking to my unresponsive form as if trying to revive me. Emily, can you hear me? Stay with us. Emily, beneath the blanket." Her hand squeezed mine gently, a reassurance that this was still part of the plan, that everything was proceeding as expected. Distantly, I heard sirens approaching, then a flurry of activity, the front door opening, heavy footsteps, unfamiliar voices. "Ma'am, we're with emergency services. Can you tell us what happened?" A young man's voice, Tyler Collins, the inexperienced EMT Sarah had mentioned. "I came to visit my friend. We have tea every Saturday," Sarah explained, her voice breaking convincingly. "I found her like this on the floor. I tried CPR, but she wasn't responding." I felt new hands on me now, checking my neck for a pulse, lifting my eyelids, placing a stethoscope against my chest. "No carotid pulse," a second voice reported. "No visible respiration. Beginning CPR," Tyler said, and I felt pressure on my chest as he began compressions. For several minutes, they worked on my lifeless body, administering CPR, checking for vital signs, even using what I assumed was a defibrillator at one point. Through it all, I remained in my strange, half-conscious state, aware but unable to respond. Finally, I heard Tyler's defeated voice. "Time of death, 3:47 p.m. A wave of surreal disorientation washed over me. I had just been declared legally dead. "I'm so sorry, ma'am," the second EMT said to Sarah. "It appears your friend suffered a massive heart attack." At her age, with her medical history, these things can happen very suddenly. Sarah played her role perfectly, breaking down in tears. "But she seemed fine yesterday. We were supposed to have tea today." "Did she have any family we should notify?" Tyler asked gently. "Her son, Michael," Sarah said between sobs, "and her brother, James. I have their numbers in my phone. We'll need to transport her to the hospital for official pronouncement," the second EMT explained. "Would you like to ride with us?" "Yes, please," Sarah replied. "I can't leave her alone." I felt myself being lifted onto what must have been a stretcher, then carried out of my home. The bright afternoon sunlight penetrated even my dulled senses as they loaded me into the ambulance. During the ride to the hospital, Sarah sat beside me, ostensibly grieving. Under the blanket covering me, her hand found mine again, squeezing reassuringly. The pulse oximeter remained hidden on my finger, monitoring my true vital signs. At the hospital, I was wheeled directly to the morgue area, where Dr. Thompson was waiting. Once the EMTs had left and the doors were secured, the real work began. "Her vital signs are stable but still depressed," I heard Sarah report. "Pulse 42, respiration shallow but regular, blood pressure 90/60. "Let's get the reversal medication in her system," Dr. Thompson replied. "The sooner she's fully conscious, the better." I felt a sharp prick in my arm, another injection. Within minutes, warmth began spreading through my body, and the heavy fog clouding my mind started to lift. Gradually, I regained the ability to move my fingers, then my hands, and finally to open my eyes. "Doctor," Thompson's concerned face appeared above me. "Emily, can you hear me?" "Yes," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "Am I back from the dead?" His serious expression broke into a relieved smile. "Technically, you were never dead. But legally, yes, you've just experienced your own death." The next hour passed in a blur of medical checks and hushed conversations. Dr. Thompson had arranged a private room where I could recover without being seen. Meanwhile, Sarah made the calls that would set the next phase of our plan in motion. First, she called Michael. I could only hear her side of the conversation, but it told me everything I needed to know. "Michael, it's Sarah Williams, your mother's neighbor. I have terrible news. Your mother passed away this afternoon." A pause. "Yes, it appears to have been a heart attack. I found her in her house when I came for our usual Saturday tea. The paramedics said it was very sudden, that she didn't suffer." Another pause. "They've taken her to Memorial Hospital. I'm here now. I'm so sorry. Michael, I know how much you loved your mother." The clinical detachment in her voice as she delivered this last line sent a chill through me. She was playing her role perfectly, but the words cut deep nonetheless. Did Michael ever truly love me? Next, she called James, delivering the same news with the same calculated sympathy. Then she turned to me, her expression grim. "They're both coming to the hospital. Michael and Olivia should arrive in about 20 minutes. James and Catherine shortly after. Elizabeth has the cameras ready at your house for when they go there later." The reality of what we had done, what we were doing, crashed over me like a wave. My family believed I was dead. They were coming to identify my body, to begin the process of mourning. Or more likely, to begin the process of dividing my assets. I didn't think it would feel this. I struggled to find the right word. "Real," Sarah offered. "Violent," I replied. "It feels like I've torn something that can't be repaired." Sarah sat beside me, taking my hand. "What they plan to do to you, what they still believe they're going to do tomorrow, that's the true violence here. Emily, remember that." Dr. Thompson returned with a wheelchair. "We need to move you to the hiding place now. Your son will be here soon." He wheeled me through a series of back corridors to a small observation room connected to the morgue. Through a one-way glass window, I would be able to see and hear everything in the main room without being detected. "From here, you'll witness their initial reactions," Dr. Thompson explained. "Robert will have prepared a body that, superficially, resembles yours. The face will be partially covered, citing facial damage during CPR efforts. They'll only be allowed a brief viewing to confirm identity. The clinical efficiency with which these medical professionals had orchestrated my fake death was both reassuring and disturbing. I wondered what kind of experiences in their careers had prepared them for such an elaborate deception. "And after they leave," I asked, "you'll be taken to Sarah's house through the service entrance." Dr. Thompson replied, "No one will see you. From there, you'll monitor the cameras at your home remotely, documenting everything they say and do when they think you're gone." I nodded, a strange calm settling over me. In the past week, I had discovered my son planned to murder me, faked my own death, and was now preparing to spy on my family as they reacted to my demise. My life had become unrecognizable. From my hidden vantage point, I didn't have to wait long. The morgue doors opened, and Michael entered alongside Olivia. My breath caught in my throat at the sight of my son. He wore a dark blue suit, always conscious of appearances, but his usual impeccable grooming was slightly disheveled, as if he'd dressed in a hurry. Olivia stood slightly behind him, her face appropriately somber in a tasteful black dress that somehow looked brand new. Dr. Thompson greeted them with professional sympathy. "Mr. Smith, Mrs. Smith, I'm very sorry for your loss. Your mother suffered a sudden cardiac event this afternoon. By the time emergency services arrived, there was nothing they could do." Michael nodded stiffly. May I see her?" "Of course. This way, please." Dr. Thompson led them to a gurney where my body lay covered with a sheet. With practiced gentleness, he pulled the sheet back to reveal the face of the deceased, a woman approximately my age, with similar gray-streaked hair, though her face was partially obscured by medical gauze. "We had to perform extensive CPR," Dr. Thompson explained. "There was some facial trauma as a result." Michael stared at the body, his expression unreadable. Then, to my shock, tears began streaming down his face. "Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking. For one terrible moment, my resolve wavered. Was I wrong? Had I misheard or misunderstood the conversation in the car? Could my son be genuinely grieving? Then Olivia placed her hand on Michael's shoulder and whispered something in his ear that the microphones barely picked up. "Remember where we are?" Michael immediately straightened, wiping his tears and composing himself. The grief vanished, replaced by a mask of appropriate sorrow. "What needs to be done now?" he asked Dr. Thompson, his voice steady and businesslike. "We'll need you to sign some paperwork, and you'll want to contact a funeral home. Did your mother have any specific wishes for her arrangements?" "Simple cremation," Michael replied without hesitation. "No viewing, no ceremony. She was a very private person." I had never expressed such wishes. In fact, we had never discussed funeral arrangements at all. Dr. Thompson nodded. "I understand. I'll have the death certificate prepared. You'll need it for insurance purposes and to settle her estate." "Thank you, Doctor," Michael said, shaking his hand. "We appreciate your discretion in this difficult time." As they turned to leave, James and Catherine arrived. The brothers exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret, something between acknowledgement and complicity. James went through the same viewing process, though with far less emotional display. Catherine didn't even approach the body, staying by the door with her arms crossed. "So it's done," I heard James mutter to Michael as they huddled together, signing forms. "Natural causes, just like we discussed." Michael shot him a warning glance. "Not now, Uncle James." After they had all left, I sat in stunned silence, processing what I had witnessed. The tears, the performance, the cold efficiency with which they had arranged my cremation, a perfect way to destroy any evidence of foul play had they actually succeeded in poisoning me tomorrow. "Are you all right?" Sarah asked, entering the observation room. "No," I replied honestly. "But I'm certain now that we're doing the right thing." Sarah helped me into the wheelchair, and Dr. Thompson escorted us through the service corridors to an unmarked van where Elizabeth Turner waited. "Mrs. Johnson," she greeted me with professional intensity. "The cameras are active in your house. We're recording everything." The ride to Sarah's house passed in silence. I felt hollowed out, as if the medications that had simulated my death had taken something real from me in the process. In a way, perhaps they had. The Emily Johnson who believed in family, who had sacrificed everything for her son, who had trusted her brother, that woman was indeed dead. At Sarah's house, we gathered around her dining room table where several laptop computers displayed feeds from the hidden cameras in my home. For hours, nothing happened. Then, just after 8 p.m., the front door opened. Michael entered first, followed by Olivia, James, and Catherine. They moved through my home with an air of ownership that made my stomach churn. "Should we wait until tomorrow to go through her things?" Olivia asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Why wait?" Catherine replied, dropping all pretense of grief now that they were alone. "The sooner we inventory everything, the sooner we can move forward." Michael hesitated briefly. "She's been dead less than 6 hours. And," James challenged, "she's not getting any less dead. Michael, we need to secure the important documents before anyone starts asking questions." That moment of hesitation from Michael gave me a flicker of hope, a hope that was immediately extinguished by his next words. "You're right. Let's start with her bedroom. That's where she kept all her financial documents." I watched in silent horror as they scattered throughout my house like looters after a disaster. Olivia went straight to my jewelry box, examining each piece with a critical eye. "Most of this is costume jewelry," she complained, holding up the pearl necklace Thomas had given me on our 5th anniversary. "Barely worth donating to Goodwill." "Check the bottom drawer," Michael instructed. She kept the real pieces separate. My breath caught. How did he know about my hidden compartment? Where I kept my mother's wedding ring and the few genuine pieces I owned, Catherine had started pulling books from my shelves, shaking each one to see if anything fell out. "People her age often hide cash in books," she explained when James gave her a questioning look. Meanwhile, Michael had found my financial folder exactly where I kept it in the locked drawer of my bedside table. He broke the lock with a letter opener without a moment's hesitation. "Here we go," he announced, spreading the papers across my bed. "Savings account at First National, $47,235. Checking account, $3,112. And the life insurance policy, $100,000 or sole beneficiary Michael Smith." "Perfect," Olivia said with undisguised satisfaction. "With that, plus what we get from selling the house, we'll have enough for the down payment on Lakeside Estates and to clear most of our debt." "And our share?" James asked pointedly. "As agreed," Michael replied smoothly. 25% of everything. Watching them divide my life savings while my body was supposedly still cooling in the morgue was more painful than I had imagined possible. But the worst was yet to come. James wandered into my bedroom and spotted the family photo on my nightstand, one of the few pictures where we all appeared together, taken at Christmas 5 years ago. Instead of showing any sentiment upon seeing it, he tossed it casually into the trash bin. "We don't need to keep these sentimental things," he said dismissively. "James is right," Olivia confirmed. "We need to be practical. We're going to sell the house quickly, so we can't clutter ourselves with useless mementos." Michael nodded in agreement, not even glancing at the discarded photo of his mother. Then Catherine said the words that extinguished any last doubt I might have harbored. "Honestly, I'm surprised it took her so long to die, with how stubborn she was. I thought she'd live to be 90 just to spite us." They all laughed at my death, at my supposed stubbornness for having lived so long. Michael pulled out his phone and began making calls. "Morrison Real Estate Agency. This is Michael Smith. I need you to come appraise a house for a quick sale." "Yes, it's urgent. The owner, my mother, passed away today. We want it on the market by next week." They hadn't even planned a proper funeral. When Olivia asked about arrangements, Michael's response chilled me to the bone. "Simple cremation, no service, minimal expense. We'll tell people it was her wish to keep things private." "And if people ask why there was no ceremony," Catherine asked. "We'll say she specifically requested it in her will." Michael replied without hesitation. "No one will question a son honoring his mother's last wishes." The casual way he invented these lies about me, about what I would have wanted, made me realize just how little he actually knew me, or perhaps how little he cared to know me. For 3 hours, they systematically went through my home, cataloging every potentially valuable item, planning the sale, distributing my belongings as if they were spoils of war. They even found the $800 in cash I kept in my freezer for emergencies, which James promptly pocketed with a smirk. "Finder's fee," he joked, and no one objected. When they finally left, my home had been completely violated. The careful organization of my lifetime had been destroyed in a single evening of greed. I sat in Sarah's dining room, watching the empty rooms of my house on the camera feeds, tears streaming down my face. "I knew it would be bad," I whispered. "But this?" Sarah placed her hand over mine. "Now you know exactly who they are. Emily. And more importantly, you have it all on video." Elizabeth nodded grimly. "Every word, every action, documented. When we go public with this, they won't be able to deny any of it." I wiped my tears with trembling hands. "What happens next?" "Now we prepare for your resurrection," Elizabeth said, a determined glint in her eye. "They think they've won. They think they're safe. That's when we'll strike." Sarah outlined the next phase of our plan. "They'll spend the next few days making arrangements for your cremation, for selling the house, for collecting the insurance. We'll document all of it. Then, when they hold their formal meeting to divide your assets, which Michael has already mentioned, that's when you'll make your grand entrance. With news cameras," Elizabeth added. "Live broadcast. Their reactions, their panic, their guilt all captured for the world to see." The ruthlessness of the plan matched the ruthlessness of what my family had done, what they had planned to do. An eye for an eye. Yet I couldn't help but wonder if we were crossing a line, becoming as calculating as they were. "Is this justice?" I asked softly. "Or revenge?" Sarah squeezed my hand. "It's protection, Emily. They were going to kill you. This is how you ensure they can never try again." That night, in Sarah's guest room, I slept fitfully, haunted by dreams of Michael as a child, reaching for me with small hands that turned into adult hands holding poison as he approached. I awoke before dawn, disoriented and grief-stricken. For a moment, I forgot where I was, reaching for my familiar bedside lamp. The unfamiliar surroundings brought everything crashing back. I was officially dead, watching my family celebrate my demise. Over the next 3 days, we continued monitoring their activities through the cameras. Michael and Olivia visited my house daily, sometimes with a real estate agent, sometimes with potential buyers. They had marked the property for estate sale and priced it well below market value for a quick transaction. James and Catherine came by regularly as well, gradually removing items they wanted before the house was emptied. I watched Catherine try on my clothes, discarding most with disdainful comments about their outdated style. The most disturbing discovery came when we observed Michael in my home office, going through my personal papers. He found my journal, the one I'd kept for years, documenting my life, my hopes, my private thoughts. Instead of setting it aside with respect, he skimmed through it, occasionally reading passages aloud to Olivia with mocking commentary. "Listen to this," he laughed, flipping to a page I recognized from the previous year. "I'm so proud of Michael. When I see him in his law office, I sometimes can't believe he's the same little boy I raised alone. All those years of sacrifice were worth it." God, she was so sentimental. Olivia rolled her eyes. "Sacrifice, please. She guilted you about that cleaning job for decades." "True," Michael agreed, tossing the journal into a box marked "Donate Trash." "She never let me forget how hard she worked, as if I owed her my entire life because she did what parents are supposed to do anyway." Hearing my son dismiss my years of back-breaking labor, the nights I went hungry so he could eat, the dreams I deferred so he could have his, it broke something fundamental inside me, the last lingering hope that he might have some redeeming quality, some shred of the loving boy I'd raised, vanished completely. "I've seen enough," I said, turning away from the screens. Sarah nodded sympathetically. "The cremation is scheduled for tomorrow. They've arranged for the minimum waiting period required by law. After that, they plan to meet at your house on Saturday to formally divide everything. That's when we'll make our move," Elizabeth confirmed. "I've coordinated with the police department. They'll have officers standing by when we reveal the truth." The following day, what should have been the day of my cremation, Dr. Thompson fabricated the necessary paperwork to make it appear the procedure had been completed. Michael collected a small urn of ashes, not mine. Of course, with such casual indifference that even the funeral home director seemed taken aback. By Saturday morning, all the pieces were in place for my dramatic return from the dead. Elizabeth had arranged for a news crew to be ready. The police had been briefed about the situation and had reviewed some of our evidence. Sarah had helped me prepare both physically and mentally for the confrontation to come. I chose my outfit carefully, a red dress I had bought for Michael's law school graduation, but had never worn because Olivia had suggested it wasn't appropriate for the occasion. I did my hair and makeup meticulously, determined to look nothing like the feeble old woman they believed me to be. "Are you ready for this?" Sarah asked as we prepared to leave her house. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "I've been ready since the moment I heard my son planning my murder." Elizabeth's news van was parked a block away from my house. We could see Michael's BMW and James's sedan already in the driveway. "They're all inside," Elizabeth confirmed, checking the live camera feeds on her tablet. "They've gathered in the living room. Michael has prepared documents for everyone to sign regarding the distribution of assets." The police car pulled up discreetly behind us. Two officers approached a tall, serious-looking man introduced as Detective Wilson and his younger female partner, Officer Martinez. "Mrs. Johnson," Detective Wilson greeted me with a firm handshake. "I've reviewed the video evidence. What your family planned and what they believe they've accomplished is deeply disturbing. We're ready to make arrests once you've confronted them." I nodded, a strange calm settling over me. "Let's go." Our small procession approached my house, Elizabeth and her cameraman in front, recording everything, followed by me and Sarah, with the police officers flanking us. My heart pounded so violently I thought it might burst from my chest. Elizabeth knocked firmly on my own front door. After a moment, Michael opened it, irritation crossing his face at the sight of news cameras. "Can I help you?" he asked coldly. "Michael Smith," Elizabeth said in her professional reporter voice. "I'm Elizabeth Turner from Channel 7 News. We're here about your mother, Emily Johnson." Michael's expression shifted to practiced grief. "My mother passed away recently. This is a private family matter, and we're not interested in any media coverage." "That's interesting," Elizabeth replied, "because your mother is very interested in speaking with you." With perfect timing, I stepped forward into the frame. The color drained from Michael's face so rapidly I thought he might faint. His mouth opened, but no sound emerged. "Hello, Michael," I said calmly. "May I come in, after all? This is still my house." Behind him, I could hear gasps and a scream that sounded like Olivia. Michael stumbled backward, allowing our group to enter the living room where the others were gathered. The scene was exactly as I had imagined it would be, papers spread across the coffee table, my family seated around it with pens in hand, dividing my earthly possessions while the urn containing my supposed ashes sat mockingly on the mantel. Olivia was the first to react, her face contorted with terror. "Oh my God, it can't be. You're dead. We saw your body." James had gone completely pale, gripping the armrest of his chair so tightly his knuckles turned white. Catherine began to hyperventilate, her eyes darting around as if searching for an escape route. "Surprise," DC said, the single word echoing in the shocked silence. "I'm afraid the reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. The camera captured every moment of their panic, their disbelief, their dawning horror as they realized what was happening." "This is impossible," Michael finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "We saw the hospital, the cremation." "What you saw," I interrupted, "was an elaborate deception designed to reveal the truth about all of you. A truth I discovered when I overheard your conversation with Olivia in your car last week." His eyes widened with recognition. "The day you were going to surprise me at the office." "Yes, I hid in your back seat with a chocolate cake I'd baked for you. Instead of surprising you, I got the surprise of my life hearing my own son plan my murder." Elizabeth's camera focused on Michael's face as the full implication of my words sank in. Behind him, Olivia began to sob, not with relief at seeing me alive, but with the terror of being caught. That's a ridiculous accusation," James sputtered, finding his voice. "Emily, You're clearly confused. We've been mourning you, mourning me. I laughed bitterly. Is that what you call this meeting to divide my assets? Is that what you call selling my house before my body was even cold? Is that what you call tossing my family photos in the trash and mocking my journal entries? Their expressions confirmed what I already knew. They had no defense, no explanation that could justify what they had done. We have everything, I continued, my voice growing stronger. Every conversation in my house since my death, every disparaging comment, every plan to profit from my demise. But most importantly, we have the original conversation where you planned to poison me tomorrow at dinner. Detective Wilson stepped forward. Michael Smith, Olivia Smith, James Wilson, Catherine Wilson. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, attempted fraud, and planning a homicide for financial gain. As the officers began reading them their rights, the reality of the situation finally seemed to hit Michael. He lunged toward me, his face contorted with a mixture of rage and desperation. Mom, please, this is a terrible misunderstanding. We would never hurt you. We love you. Officer Martinez quickly restrained him, but not before I saw the truth in his eyes, not remorse for what he had planned, but fury at being caught. Love, I asked, my voice breaking slightly, despite my resolve to remain strong. Do you poison someone you love? Michael, do you celebrate when someone you love dies? Do you mock their memories and dismiss their sacrifices? Olivia was now in handcuffs, her mascara running down her face. This is a setup. She's trying to frame us for the insurance money. Insurance money that was meant to go to you upon my death, I reminded her. Money you and Michael were counting on to pay off your credit card debt and buy that house in Lakeside Estates. James and Catherine remained silent as they were handcuffed, their faces masks of defeated rage. As the officers led them toward the door, Michael looked back at me one last time. This isn't over, Mom, he hissed. You'll regret this. No, Michael, I replied with a calm I didn't feel. This ended the moment you decided your mother was worth more dead than alive. Now you'll face the consequences of your actions. After they were taken away, the house fell into a heavy silence. Elizabeth completed her live broadcast with a somber closing statement about betrayal and justice, then packed up her equipment. The red light on the camera finally blinked off, and I sank onto my sofa, emotionally drained. Are you all right? Sarah asked, sitting beside me. No, I admitted. I don't think I'll be all right for a very long time, but I'm alive. And the truth is finally out. She took my hand in hers. What will you do now? I looked around at my home, the home that less than a week ago had been filled with memories I cherished, but now felt tainted by betrayal. I don't know, I said honestly, but for the first time in decades, I'll be making that decision for myself alone. Not for Michael, not for James, not for anyone but me. As the sun began to set outside my window, casting long shadows across the room where my family had plotted my death, I felt something unexpected stir within me, not just grief or anger, but a fragile seedling of liberation. I had died and risen from those ashes. Whatever came next would be entirely new, a second life I never expected to have, free from the crushing weight of familial obligation and unappreciated sacrifice. You know, I said softly to Sarah, I've never seen the Grand Canyon. She smiled, understanding immediately. I hear it's spectacular in the spring. Maybe I'll find out for myself, I replied, the first genuine smile in days tugging at my lips. Maybe I'll find out a lot of things for myself now. The days following the arrests unfolded like scenes from someone else's life. My quiet existence had transformed into a whirlwind of police statements, legal consultations, and media inquiries. The story of a 62-year-old mother who faked her death to expose her family's murder plot had captivated the entire country. Mrs. Johnson, how does it feel to know your own son wanted you dead? Reporters would shout whenever I stepped outside. What are you going to do with your second chance at life? Others would call. I had no answers that would satisfy their hunger for drama. How could I possibly articulate the complex storm of emotions that raged within me, the profound grief of losing my family not to death, but to their own moral bankruptcy. The cold fear that still gripped me when I remembered Michael's final threat. The disorienting freedom of being untethered from decades of familial obligation. Sarah remained my steadfast guardian, fielding calls and turning away unwanted visitors. Dr. Thompson checked on me daily, monitoring the lingering effects of the medications I'd taken to simulate death. Elizabeth kept me updated on the legal proceedings, using her journalistic connections to gather information beyond what the prosecutors shared. 1 week after the arrests, District Attorney Carolyn Reyes requested a meeting at my home. She arrived promptly at 10 a.m., a formidable woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Mrs. Johnson," she greeted me, shaking my hand firmly, "I want to personally assure you that my office is taking your case very seriously." We sat in my living room, the same room where I had died, where my family had divided my possessions, where they had been arrested. I still couldn't sit there without feeling phantom chills. "The evidence is substantial," D.A. Reyes continued, opening her briefcase. "The recorded conversations, both from your car and from the surveillance after your death, provide clear intent and conspiracy. All 4 defendants are facing multiple felony charges." "What exactly are the charges?" I asked. "For Michael and Olivia, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, attempted murder, fraud, and elder abuse. For James and Catherine, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and accessory to attempted murder." She paused, studying my face. "These are serious charges. Mrs. Johnson, if convicted, your son and daughter-in-law are looking at 20 to 25 years in prison. Your brother and his wife could receive 10 to 15 years. The numbers hung in the air between us. 25 years. Michael was 35 now. He would be 60 before he tasted freedom again if he was convicted. Their lawyers have already approached us about a plea deal," D.A. Reyes added. "What kind of deal?" "They're offering guilty pleas to lesser charges, conspiracy to commit second-degree murder, which would mean sentences of 8 to 12 years for Michael and Olivia, 5 to 7 for James and Catherine." My stomach twisted. Even the reduced sentences seemed simultaneously too harsh and not harsh enough for what they had done. "Do I have any say in whether you accept this deal?" I asked. D.A. Reyes nodded. "As the victim, your input matters significantly. But I want to be clear about something. Mrs. Johnson, if we go to trial, you'll have to testify. You'll have to face them in court, answer questions from their attorneys who will try to paint you as paranoid, vindictive, manipulative, anything to create reasonable doubt. The thought of being cross-examined, of having my character dissected and maligned, made me physically ill. But the alternative, allowing them to receive reduced sentences without having to face the full public scrutiny of a trial, seemed equally unbearable. "I need time to think about it," I said finally. "Of course, take a few days. But Mrs. Johnson," her expression softened slightly, "whatever you decide, this won't be easy. Trials involving family members rarely are." After she left, I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at the calendar on my refrigerator. It still showed the month of my death, unmarked by the earthquake that had shattered my life. With trembling hands, I flipped to the current month and circled the upcoming court date for the preliminary hearing. That evening, Sarah came by with dinner, a homemade lasagna and fresh bread. We ate mostly in silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts. "I don't know if I can go through with a trial," I confessed finally, pushing my half-eaten food away. The thought of seeing them again, of having to recount everything in public. Sarah reached across the table and took my hand. "Whatever you decide, I'll be right there with you. But Emily," she hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes justice requires difficult paths. Is it justice I want, though," I whispered, "or is it punishment, revenge? I don't even know anymore. Perhaps it's closure," she suggested gently. "The ability to finally close this chapter and begin a new one." Later that night, I found myself standing in Michael's old bedroom, which I had preserved almost exactly as it had been when he left for college. Trophies lined the shelves: debate team, mock trial, academic decathlon, evidence of the bright future I had sacrificed everything to secure for him. I picked up a framed photograph from his graduation day. Michael in his cap and gown, his arm around me, both of us smiling widely. Where had that young man gone? At what point had ambition and greed eroded his humanity, his basic decency? Or had the potential for such coldness always been there? Undetected beneath the surface, a notification chimed on my phone, a news alert about the case. I ignored it. The media coverage had been relentless, with every outlet from local stations to national networks analyzing every aspect of the story. Some portrayed me as a heroic mother who had outwitted her murderous family. Others questioned the ethics of my elaborate deception, suggesting I had entrapped them. Op-eds debated the moral and legal implications of faking one's death. Even in self-defense, I had stopped reading the articles, stopped watching the news. None of them understood. None of them could possibly comprehend what it meant to discover your child, your life's work. Your greatest love had calculated the financial benefit of your death and found it favorable. 3 days later, I sat in my attorney's office, a distinguished woman named Evelyn Parker who specialized in elder law and family cases. "If you accept the plea deal," she explained, "the process will be relatively quick. They'll plead guilty to the reduced charges, be sentenced, and begin serving their terms immediately. You won't have to testify beyond providing a victim impact statement if you choose to. And if I don't accept, then we prepare for trial. It will likely be scheduled for 6 to 8 months from now. You'll need to testify extensively, and as DA Reyes mentioned, the defense will be aggressive. They'll try to portray your sting operation as entrapment, suggest you manufactured evidence, even imply you're mentally unstable." I winced at the last part. "They've already started that narrative in the press. Michael's attorney gave an interview suggesting I've been emotionally manipulative my entire life." Evelyn nodded grimly. "Unfortunately, that's just the beginning. A trial means putting not just their actions, but your entire relationship with them on public display." "What would you do?" I asked softly. "If you were in my position," she leaned back, considering her words carefully. "Professionally, I'd advise you that the plea deal offers certainty. They serve significant time. You avoid the trauma of a trial, and the story fades from public attention more quickly. And personally," a shadow crossed her face, "personally, I'd want them to face every minute of public scrutiny a trial would bring. I'd want the world to hear the recordings, to see the evidence, to know exactly what they plan to do." She straightened, resuming her professional demeanor. "But it's not my decision to make." I left her office no closer to a decision than when I'd arrived. The weight of it pressed down on me, making it difficult to breathe, to think clearly. That night, unable to sleep, I drove to the cemetery where Thomas was buried. I hadn't visited his grave in years, but suddenly I needed to be close to the only person who had ever truly loved me without condition or expectation. The cemetery was peaceful under the moonlight, the gravestones casting long shadows across the manicured grass. I found Thomas's simple marker easily, though the engraved letters had weathered with time. Thomas Anthony Smith, 1958-1995, beloved husband and father. I knelt beside the cold stone, placing my hand on its rough surface. "What would you do?" "Thomas," I whispered into the night air, "our son planned to kill me. How do I move forward from that? How do I decide his fate when he was so willing to decide mine?" Only the soft rustling of leaves answered me. But as I sat there in the quiet darkness, a strange calm began to settle over me. Thomas had been gone for 27 years, and yet I had kept him alive in my mind, in my heart. I had raised our son with stories of his father's integrity, his kindness, his sense of justice. What would Thomas think of Michael now? What would he think of what I had done to expose him as dawn broke over the horizon, casting pale light across the cemetery? I realized I had my answer, not from Thomas, but from within myself. 2 days later, I sat across from DA Reyes in her office, my decision made. "I want to go to trial," I said firmly. "I want everything, every recording, every piece of evidence made public. I want them to face the full consequences of what they plan to do." She studied me carefully. "Are you certain a trial will be grueling for you?" "I'm certain. For 27 years. I've protected my son. I've sacrificed for him, made excuses for him, believed the best of him even when evidence suggested otherwise." My voice grew stronger with each word. I won't protect him anymore. Not from this. Not from the truth. Darius nodded, a glimmer of respect in her eyes. Then we prepare for trial. My office will be in touch with the details. As predicted, the months leading up to the trial were difficult beyond measure. Michael's defense team launched an aggressive campaign to discredit me, leaking stories to the press about my supposed controlling nature, my unhealthy attachment to my adult son, my irrational jealousy of Olivia. Former acquaintances emerged from the woodwork with tales of my strange behavior incidents distorted or entirely fabricated to paint me as unstable. A distant cousin claimed I had a history of manipulative tactics to get my way. Even Michael's college roommate gave an interview suggesting I had been inappropriately dependent on my son's attention. None of it was true, but truth seemed secondary to the narrative they were constructing, that of a desperate, possessive mother who had fabricated a murder plot to regain control over her son. Through it all, Sarah remained my bulwark against despair. She fielded calls, screened visitors, and reminded me daily of what I knew to be true. Dr. Thompson provided medical documentation of my sound mental state. Elizabeth used her journalistic platform to counter the most egregious falsehoods with facts. And slowly, a community began to form around me. Other mothers who had experienced betrayal by their children, elderly individuals who had faced exploitation by family members, people who recognized in my story something true about the vulnerability of aging in a society that often views the elderly as burdens rather than treasures. Letters arrived daily, sometimes dozens, sometimes hundreds, from strangers across the country who wanted me to know they believed me, supported me, saw themselves in my struggle. One such letter came from a woman named Gabrielle Wilson, a 58-year-old former teacher whose daughter had emptied her bank accounts and abandoned her in a nursing home after a minor stroke. "What you did took immense courage," she wrote. "You refused to be a victim. You fought back when everyone expected you to be passive, grateful, invisible. Your story gave me strength to file charges against my own daughter, something I had been too ashamed to do until now." Gabrielle included her phone number, and on a particularly difficult day after a brutal pretrial hearing, I called her. Our conversation lasted hours, spanning topics from the pain of familial betrayal to our shared love of gardening. By the end, I had made my first new friend in decades. Through Gabrielle, I met others: Marion, whose son had forged her signature on loan documents; Richard, whose nephew had stolen his retirement savings; Eleanor, whose granddaughter had manipulated her into signing over her house. We began meeting weekly at a local community center, forming what we jokingly called the Phoenix Club, those who had risen from the ashes of betrayal. As the trial date approached, I made another significant decision. I put my house on the market not for financial reasons, but because I could no longer bear to live surrounded by memories that had been tainted by deception. Every room held echoes of conversations I had overheard, of plans made for my demise. With Sarah's help, I found a small but charming cottage near a community garden, its backyard bordered by mature oak trees. It was nothing like my old home, bright where the other had been traditional, open where the other had been compartmentalized, new where the other had been steeped in history. It was a fresh start, physically embodied in wood and glass. The day before the trial began, I moved into my new home. Sarah and Gabrielle helped me arrange the few pieces of furniture I had chosen to keep: my reading chair, my grandmother's quilt, Thomas's old record player. Everything else I had either sold or donated. The ghosts of my past would not follow me here. That evening, as we sat on my new porch watching the sunset, Gabrielle asked the question I had been avoiding. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" I considered my answer carefully. "As ready as I can be. I've prepared my testimony with the prosecutors. I've rehearsed answers to likely cross-examination questions. I've steeled myself to see them again." "That's not what I meant," she said gently. "Are you emotionally ready to face them, to sit in the same room with the people who plan to murder you?" "No," I admitted, watching a pair of cardinals flit between the oak branches. "I don't think anyone could be ready for that, but I'm as strong as I need to be." The trial began on a crisp Monday morning in October, exactly 6 months after my death. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters and curious onlookers. Sarah and Gabrielle flanked me as we made our way inside. a protective barrier against the shouted questions and camera flashes. The courtroom fell silent as I entered. I kept my eyes forward, refusing to look at the defense table where I knew Michael, Olivia, James, and Catherine sat with their attorneys. I had not seen any of them since the day of their arrest, and I was determined that my first glimpse would be on my terms. When I was psychologically prepared, Judge Margaret Winters, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, called the court to order. The proceedings began with opening statements, the prosecutor painting a damning picture of calculated greed and betrayal, the defense countering with allegations of my supposed instability and manipulative tendencies. I focused on my breathing, on the supportive presence of Sarah beside me, on the weight of the locket around my neck that contained a small photo of Thomas. I would not be broken by their lies. When it was time for me to testify, I walked to the witness stand with my head high. Only then did I allow myself to look at them, my son, my daughter-in-law, my brother, my sister-in-law, 4 people who had valued my life at exactly the sum of my assets. Michael looked thinner than I remembered, the orange jumpsuit hanging loosely on his frame. Olivia had none of her usual careful makeup, her natural face strangely vulnerable without its armor. James appeared to have aged a decade in 6 months, his hair noticeably grayer. Catherine alone seemed unchanged, her expression cold and assessing as ever. For 3 days, I testified about everything: my life as a single mother, my relationship with Michael, the overheard conversation in the car, the elaborate plan to fake my death, the devastating things I had witnessed afterward. The prosecutor played the recordings, and the courtroom fell deadly silent as Michael and Olivia's voices filled the room, calmly discussing how to poison me, how to make it look like a natural death, how to profit from my demise. "Mrs. Johnson," the prosecutor asked, "when you heard your son planning your murder, what was your first thought?" I looked directly at Michael as I answered. I thought there must be some mistake, that I had misheard or misunderstood, because the alternative that my only child, whom I had loved more than life itself, could coldly plan my death was inconceivable to me. "And when did you accept that what you had heard was real?" "When I confronted my brother James. When I saw in his face the confirmation that they had indeed planned to murder me for my assets. That's when I knew it wasn't a misunderstanding. That's when I knew I had to fight for my life." On the 4th day, Michael's attorney began his cross-examination, his approach exactly as predicted: aggressive, demeaning, attempting to twist my words and paint me as the villain. "Mrs. Johnson, isn't it true that you have a history of controlling behavior toward your son?" he asked, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "No, that is not true," I replied calmly. "Really, you don't consider working multiple jobs to pay for an expensive education controlling, creating a situation where your son would feel eternally indebted to you." I took a deep breath. I worked multiple jobs because I wanted my son to have opportunities I never had. I never once asked for repayment or made him feel indebted. In fact, I explicitly told him many times that seeing him succeed was all the reward I needed. Yet you kept meticulous records of every dollar you spent on his education, didn't you? I kept records of all my expenses because I was living on a very tight budget. Every dollar had to be accounted for when you're trying to stretch a cleaning lady's salary to cover college tuition. Hour after hour, he tried to provoke me into an emotional outburst, to make me appear unstable or vindictive, but I remained steady, answering each question truthfully and calmly, refusing to be baited. When he finally played his trump card, a carefully edited video of me telling a neighbor years ago that sometimes I just want to shake Michael when he's being stubborn, I simply smiled. Yes, I said that. It's a common expression among parents of teenagers, which Michael was at the time. I never actually shook him or laid a hand on him in anger throughout his entire life. By the time my testimony concluded, even some members of the jury were looking at the defense attorney with undisguised distaste. The trial continued for another 2 weeks. The prosecution presented the medical evidence, with Dr. Thompson explaining how the medications used to fake my death worked and how they differed from the poison Michael had planned to use. Sarah testified about finding me unconscious and the elaborate deception we had orchestrated. Elizabeth detailed how the hidden cameras had been placed and the surveillance conducted. Then, in a move that surprised everyone, Michael took the stand in his own defense. I steeled myself as he was sworn in, his familiar voice echoing in the courtroom as he promised to tell the truth, a concept that now seemed foreign to the son I had raised. His attorney led him through a carefully crafted narrative of his childhood, one where I was portrayed as emotionally manipulative, constantly reminding him of my sacrifices, using guilt to control his choices. He described how he had escaped my influence by marrying Olivia, only to find himself still tethered to my expectations. "We never planned to actually harm my mother," Michael claimed, his voice breaking in a performance worthy of the theater. "The conversation she overheard it was a terrible joke, a way of venting our frustrations. We were under financial pressure. Yes, but we would never have actually done anything to hurt her." The prosecutor's cross-examination was surgical in its precision. "Mr. Smith, if this was just a joke, why did you specifically discuss using a medication that would be undetectable in an autopsy?" Michael shifted uncomfortably. "It was just dark humor. We were being dramatic. And when you said, and I quote, 'The plan is perfect. Mom will have a very natural, very believable heart attack,' that was also just humor. We never intended. And your purchase of the exact medication you discussed, which was found in your apartment during the police search, was that also part of the joke?" The courtroom gasped. This was new evidence, not previously disclosed. Michael's face drained of color. That was for a research project, for a case I was working on. A research project that coincidentally involved the same substance you jokingly discussed using to murder your mother. A substance that, according to our expert witnesses, would indeed cause symptoms mimicking a heart attack and would be difficult to detect without specific testing." Michael had no answer. After 3 weeks of testimony, the case went to the jury. They deliberated for just 4 hours before returning with their verdict. As the courtroom filled for the announcement, I felt strangely calm. Whatever the outcome, I had done everything I could to expose the truth. I had refused to be a silent victim. I had fought back. On the charge of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, how do you find the defendant Michael Smith guilty? On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, how do you find a guilty, one by one? The verdicts were read. Guilty on all counts for Michael and Olivia. Guilty on most counts for James and Catherine, with acquittals only on the lesser charges of fraud. I watched Michael's face as the reality of his situation crashed down upon him. For a brief moment, his carefully constructed mask slipped, and I saw something I had never witnessed in my son before: raw, unfiltered hatred directed at me. It pierced my heart more painfully than any imagined poison ever could. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for the following month. In the interim, I tried to process what had happened, to find some sense of closure in the jury's decision. But true peace eluded me. At the sentencing, each defendant had the opportunity to speak. James and Catherine offered mechanical apologies, clearly scripted by their attorneys, expressing regret without accepting full responsibility. Olivia sobbed through a confused statement that seemed to blame everyone but herself. Then Michael stood, turning to face me directly for the first time. "Mom," he began, his voice softer than it had been in years. "I know you won't believe me, but I am truly sorry, not just for what happened, but for who I became. I don't recognize that person anymore, the one who could sit in a car and discuss," he faltered. "I lost myself somewhere along the way. The pressure, the debts, Olivia's expectations, my own ambition, none of that excuses what I considered doing." He paused, and I saw tears in his eyes that, for once, seemed genuine. "I don't ask for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that the boy you raised, the one who loved you, who was grateful for everything you sacrificed, he's still in here somewhere. And he's ashamed beyond words." I searched his face, looking for the son I had loved so desperately, trying to discern truth from manipulation. Even now, I couldn't be certain. Judge Winters delivered the sentences with solemn gravity: 20 years for Michael, 15 for Olivia, 12 for James, and 10 for Catherine, all essentially as the DA had originally predicted. as they were led away. Michael looked back at me one last time. In that final glance was a question I couldn't answer. Was there anything left between us worth salvaging 2 months after the sentencing? I received a letter from the prison where Michael was serving his time. For days, I left it unopened on my kitchen counter, both dreading and curious about its contents. Finally, on a quiet Sunday morning, I steeled myself and broke the seal. 4 pages of handwritten text, the penmanship I recognized from years of school assignments and thank you notes. "Dear Mom," it began. I've written this letter 100 times in my head, searching for words that could possibly convey the depth of my remorse. There are none adequate to the task. He went on to describe his life in prison, the therapy he was receiving, the long nights spent reflecting on how he had become capable of considering patricide. He wrote about remembering small kindnesses I had shown him throughout his childhood, the Halloween costume I had sewn by hand when we couldn't afford store-bought, the time I had walked 3 miles in the rain to bring him his forgotten science project, the birthday when I had worked a triple shift to buy him the bicycle he wanted. "Each memory is now a knife of guilt," he wrote. "I don't understand how I could have forgotten these things, how I could have reduced you to nothing more than a financial calculation. Some days I think there must be something fundamentally broken in me to have betrayed you so completely." The final paragraph read, "I know I can never undo what I did. I know I deserve to be here. And I know you may never be able to forgive me. But I want you to know that every day I spend in this cell, I remember the incredible woman who raised me. And I hate myself for having been so blind to your love, whether you ever read this or not. I needed to write it. I needed to acknowledge, if only to myself, the enormity of my betrayal." I read the letter many times over the following weeks, trying to determine if it reflected genuine remorse or was simply another manipulation. The truth was, I would never know with certainty, and perhaps it didn't matter. What mattered was how I chose to move forward. After careful consideration, I decided to write back, not to forgive, but to close that chapter definitively. "Michael," I wrote, "I've received and read your letter. I believe your remorse is sincere, but forgiveness is something you'll have to earn over many years, possibly the rest of your life. The son I raised is buried somewhere beneath the man who planned my death, and only you can decide if he's worth excavating from the rubble of your choices." I never received a reply to that letter, and that was all right. Some conversations have no satisfying conclusion. Some wounds never fully heal. The best we can do is learn to live with the scars they leave behind. 6 months after the trial, my new life had begun to take shape. My cottage, once sparse and unfamiliar, now felt like a true home. I had planted a garden with Sarah's help, not just flowers, but vegetables and herbs, things that would nourish as well as beautify. The Phoenix Club continued to meet weekly, expanding to include others who had found their way to us after hearing my story. Together, we created a support network for elderly individuals facing exploitation, offering resources, legal advice, and most importantly, the understanding that comes only from shared experience. Gabrielle had become a dear friend, her forthright nature and quick wit a perfect complement to my more reserved personality. We traveled together to the Grand Canyon that spring, fulfilling the promise I had made to myself in the aftermath of the trial. Standing at the edge of that magnificent chasm, watching the play of light and shadow across ancient stone, I felt a sense of perspective that had eluded me for months. My life had been fractured. Yes, relationships I had thought unbreakable had been shattered beyond repair, but I was still here, still capable of wonder, still open to new experiences and connections. With my share of the proceeds from selling my old house, I established a scholarship fund for single parents pursuing higher education, a way of transforming the money that had motivated my family's betrayal into something positive and life-affirming. I also began volunteering at a local elementary school, reading to children whose bright, uncomplicated enthusiasm for stories reminded me of Michael at that age. Sometimes the memories brought pain, but increasingly, I found myself able to separate the sweet-faced boy of my past from the troubled man of my present. On the 1-year anniversary of my death, Sarah organized a small gathering at her home not to commemorate the trauma, but to celebrate its transcendence. Gabrielle was there, along with several members of the Phoenix Club, Dr. Thompson, Elizabeth, and even D.A. Reyes, who had become something of a mentor as I navigated the complexities of the legal aftermath. To Emily, Sarah toasted, raising her glass, who taught us all that it's never too late to fight for yourself, to discover your own strength, to begin again. Later, as we sat on Sarah's porch watching fireflies illuminate the gathering dusk, Gabrielle asked the question that had been on many minds but few lips. Do you ever regret it? Not the fake death itself, but pressing charges, going through with the trial, all of it. I considered my answer carefully. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my son became someone capable of planning my murder. I regret the years of my life I spent nurturing a relationship that proved to be built on sand. I paused, watching a particularly bright firefly trace patterns in the darkening air. But do I regret standing up for myself, fighting back, refusing to be erased? No, never. What about forgiveness? She pressed gently. Do you think you'll ever forgive them? Forgiveness isn't something I can force, I replied. It might come with time, or it might not. What I've learned is that I don't need to forgive them to move forward with my own life. Their actions are part of my story now, but they don't define it. As I drove home that night, windows down to catch the cool evening breeze, I found myself reflecting on the strange journey of the past year. I had lost my family but found a community. I had lost my home but created a new one. I had lost illusions but gained clarity. At 63, I had been reborn not as the selfless mother, the supportive sister, the agreeable woman who placed everyone's needs above her own, but as simply Emily Johnson, a woman with boundaries, with dignity, with a voice that demanded to be heard. Tomorrow, I would plant tomatoes in my garden, attend a Phoenix Club meeting, begin planning a trip to the Florida Keys with Gabrielle. Small actions, ordinary choices, the quiet building blocks of a life reclaimed. My name is Emily Johnson. I'm 63 years old, and this is the story of how I died to truly live. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below and let me know what city you're watching from. If you liked this story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.